My grandson looked at me and asked, "Grandma, how come you don't have a bed?" Before I could speak, my son replied, "She doesn't need one." But the judge later thought differently. I woke up feeling the sting of cold cement pressing through the thin mattress beneath me. At 76, the pain settled into my bones even before my eyes managed to open. The basement carried the smell of damp laundry and old paint air that sticks to your skin and constantly reminds you that you're living in a place you were never meant to. I pulled the blanket closer, though it barely fought against the winter chill crawling through the concrete walls. The door swung open without warning. At the top of the stairs stood Hannah's silhouette, her voice cutting through the silence. "Get up, old woman. You're blocking the laundry." Slowly I pushed myself upright, trying not to reveal how the pain ran down my spine. Jason stood behind her, scrolling on his phone, not even giving me a glance. "You should be grateful we let you stay here at all," he muttered, sounding like he was repeating a line he rehearsed. Before I found my balance, little footsteps echoed on the steps. Oliver's bright, innocent face appeared. His eyes scanned the exposed pipes, the cold concrete, the folded towels stacked near my mattress, then stopped on the empty space where a bed should have been. "Grandma, why don't you have a bed?" I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't form. Jason answered instead, his tone sharp and careless. "Because she doesn't need one. Beds are for family. She's just an old obligation." Hannah folded her arms, lips curling. "If she wanted comfort, she should have thought about that before ruining our lives." Her words hit harder than the winter cold. Ruining their lives. That was the story they liked to tell. It made stepping over me, speaking through me, and treating me like something disposable much easier. Oliver looked back at me, waiting. I smiled softly. No child should carry the weight of adult cruelty. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I whispered. But inside I folded like soaked paper left in the rain. If you believe justice deserves celebration, go ahead and smash that hype button. Let stories like this keep reaching farther and farther. Your support helps us share understanding and love with those who need it. Thank you for being here. Keep listening. Jason clapped his hands once. "Come on, Ollie. Grandma has chores. We have real things to do. Real things." As if my entire day wasn't spent scrubbing, folding, lifting, cooking without a single thank you. I did everything they asked. Watching Oliver for free, cooking every meal, cleaning their home, disappearing into the basement whenever guests arrived so I wouldn't be an inconvenience. My life had turned into a routine built around their comfort. Night settled quickly. I curled on my side, knees drawn up, hands tucked under my cheek for warmth. The thin blanket slid off twice, and each time I pulled it back with trembling fingers. I stared into the dark, listening to muffled voices drifting from the living room above. Then Jason's voice carried clearly casual, like he was discussing moving furniture. "When she dies, we'll finally have room for a real home office." Hannah's laughter followed, sharp and pleased. I kept my eyes open even as the darkness pressed tight around them. Not yet. Back then, I owned a tiny bakery, peeling blue paint on the walls, a little bell on the door that chimed whenever someone walked in. Jason practically grew up behind the counter, doing homework while dough rose beside him. I raised him alone after his father left, pouring every dollar into keeping us afloat. We didn't have much, but the place smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, and somehow that made life feel gentler. That bakery is where I met Thomas. He came every Friday at 7:30 sharp for a slice of pecan pie, pretending it was for a coworker until he admitted he hated sharing it. Kind, patient, gentle, the sort of man who brushed flour off my cheek without making me feel embarrassed. When we married years later, customers joked they'd seen it coming long before we did. Thomas dreamed big jars of homemade sauces, pickled vegetables, old Southern recipes turning into a local brand. I created the recipes, tested every batch, registered the trademark, and filed the LLC in my name. Not for control. Thomas hated paperwork, and Jason at that time was drowning in online gambling debt. He couldn't be trusted with a library card, let alone a business. But Jason believed the world owed him inheritance by default. I even heard him tell his college friends, "When Dad dies, the company will be mine. That's how it works." As if businesses passed through blood, not effort. Later, when he came begging for $10,000 for some crypto marketing startup idea, even he couldn't explain it, I said no. Not because I wanted him small, but because I had already spent months secretly paying off loan sharks who kept calling the bakery asking for my brilliant young entrepreneur. I'd even found falsified tax forms in his backpack, numbers wiped out with correction fluid, like a kid cheating on homework. He didn't hear the protection in my refusal. Only insult. You never believed in me, he yelled. You care more about your stupid recipes than your own son. I remember standing there with a stack of laundry, feeling every word cut deeper than he could imagine. Hannah, back then just his new girlfriend, leaned in, whispering poison. Your mom is threatened by your success. She wants you small, so she can stay the hero forever. She learned quickly exactly where to press. After that, Jason rewrote the story. He told anyone who would listen that I destroyed his future, that I hoarded money, that I refused to support him because I loved power more than family. The truth never mattered. The narrative always did. What Jason never told Hannah, what he never acknowledged, was that I had sold my bakery just to pay for his college tuition. Every cupcake, every loaf, every early morning, and every burned fingertip hat turned into tuition bills so he could build a life beyond that tiny shop. But Hannah brushed it off with a simple flick of her hand. That's what mothers do. She only did the bare minimum, as if sacrificing the only dream I ever created with my own hands was nothing more than a footnote in some manual titled Basic Parenting. When Thomas passed away, everything shifted overnight. The grief had barely settled into the walls when Jason walked into the office, picked up the framed photo of the first jar we ever sold, and smirked like someone claiming a trophy. Now I'll do things my way, he said. She's either with us or in our way. I should have fought back. I should have reminded him whose name appeared on every legal document. But grief weighs heavy, and I was still learning to breathe without Thomas beside me. I thought Jason only needed time. I thought Hannah would soften with age. I thought love would eventually win. I was wrong. They grew into the story they invented: a selfish woman, a controlling mother, a gatekeeper hoarding a family-built company. They never realized Thomas, in one of his last conversations, whispered for me to protect the business from greedy hands. Keep it safe, he said. Don't let ambition destroy what we built. I promised him I would. I just never imagined those greedy hands would belong to his own son. Some nights, after the chores were done and the house grew quiet above me, I would sit with Thomas's photo resting on my lap and whisper, "You told me to guard the company from those who would take advantage. But how do I protect it when the ones trying to take it are our own children?" The basement never answered. It simply held the weight of everything I never dared say out loud. After Thomas's funeral, the house felt hollow in ways I couldn't name. But Jason filled the emptiness quickly. 3 weeks later, he showed up with boxes stacked in the truck bed and said, "Mom shouldn't be alone." The words sounded tender, but the tone was rehearsed, almost managerial. Hannah followed behind him with decorative pillows and a clipboard, moving in like someone redesigning a show home from the ground up. At first, I believed them. I believed their kindness meant something. I believed grief softened people, not sharpened them. They offered me the master bedroom because it would be better for my joints. But within 2 months, Hannah announced she needed that room for a baby she wasn't even pregnant with yet. So I moved to the small room by the stairs without protest. A few months later, Jason said he needed that room for a home office because investors liked a professional backdrop. This time I hesitated, but only for a moment. I packed my things and carried them down to the basement myself. I thought it was temporary. I thought love would return. They placed my mattress in the far corner, tucked away from the light. The pipes above groaned each time someone flushed. The concrete stayed cold no matter how many blankets I stacked beneath me. But Jason smiled as though this were a reasonable deal. "You still have a roof," he said. "Plenty of families do worse for their elderly." What made it sting sharper was the king-size bed he bought for the guest room upstairs. Purchased the same week, he told me. There wasn't enough money to replace my worn-down mattress. Hannah brushed her hand across the new comforter and laughed. "Guests need to see the good side of the family. She's the side we hide." She said it almost playfully, but Jason nodded along. That was the moment I realized this wasn't temporary. This was a classification, a placement. I stayed quiet. I made breakfast every morning. I watched Oliver before and after school. I folded laundry, vacuumed, and stepped out of the way because that was how they preferred me. A mother blended into the foundation like an old wooden beam holding up a house that had forgotten it needed her. The night of the party was when everything shifted. Hannah had invited Jason's coworkers, several friends, and a potential investor with an expensive-looking smile. I heard the music thumping through the basement ceiling and carried up a tray of small pastries I had baked that morning. Pecan bites Thomas once called perfect. I climbed the stairs slowly, not wanting to interrupt anyone. But Hannah saw me before I reached the kitchen. She stepped in front of me, wearing a smile bright enough to burn. "These aren't up to our brand standard," she said loudly, ensuring everyone heard. "Take them back downstairs." My hands tightened on the tray. Not out of rebellion, but to hide the trembling. A woman in a sequin blazer asked gently, "Where does your mom stay now?" Before I could speak, Hannah let out a short, cold laugh. "In the basement, on a mattress. Old things go where old things belong." The chuckles that followed weren't loud, but they blurred the room around me. I looked to Jason, hoping for some sign of discomfort. A crack in the mask, a flicker of the boy I once knew. But he only shrugged. "We feed her. That's more than some people would do." The investor's expression shifted, confusion mixing with disbelief. He leaned toward Jason and asked quietly, "Didn't she create the original recipes?" Jason waved the question away as if it were dust. "She only cooked the real recipes. The business itself is all mine now." A lie spoken with enough confidence becomes a story, and a story repeated enough times turns into truth for the ones who benefit from it. Oliver stood behind the kitchen island, his small fingers curled over the counter's edge. His eyes were glossy, his lips pulled tight, as if he understood more than any child ever should. He whispered, "Grandma, can I have one?" But Hannah shot him a look sharp enough to freeze him in place. "If you feel justice deserves to be celebrated, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far into the distance. Your support helps us bring understanding and kindness to those who truly deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening." Those words drifted through my mind like a reminder that somewhere, someone still believed truth mattered. I backed away inch by inch, holding the trail like a shield I already knew could not protect me. When I reached the basement door, I heard someone upstairs murmur, "She looks so small." Another voice answered quietly, "Age does that." But age had nothing to do with the shrinking. Cruelty shrinks people. Rewritten history shrinks them. Back on the concrete floor, I set the tray beside my mattress and lowered myself slowly. I tasted one pastry. It was perfect, the kind Thomas would have smiled at lovingly. I stared up at the unfinished ceiling, the beams, the dangling wires, the muffled footsteps above me, and whispered, "They used the recipes to make themselves rich, and then they bury me on the coldest floor in the house." But the basement did not swallow me. It sharpened me. That night, long after the party faded and the footsteps upstairs softened into the rhythm of a home that no longer welcomed me, I lay awake on the thin mattress, watching shadows stretch across the concrete. The door creaked softly. Oliver slipped inside holding a plate wrapped in foil. He whispered with such gentleness it nearly broke me, "Grandma, I saved these for you." He placed the pastries down, hesitating, shifting from foot to foot the way children do when carrying something too heavy for their age. "Grandma," he asked quietly, "why does Dad get mad when I say you made the first sauces?" The question didn't hurt. It opened something in me, something I had tucked away so deeply I had forgotten it still breathed. I sat up, brushed crumbs off my lap, and whispered, because some truths make people uncomfortable. But after he left, his question echoed louder. I realized I had never looked through the business papers since Thomas died. Back then, grief made every piece of paperwork unbearable. I let Jason handle it because I thought he was hurting too. I mistook distance for maturity, silence for responsibility. I assumed he took charge out of necessity, not ambition. I assumed good faith where none existed. The realization chilled me more than the winter air, creeping through the basement walls. When the house finally slept, I crept upstairs, careful not to let the steps creak. I moved through the hallway like a ghost retracing familiar patterns, and opened the storage closet at the end. Dust covered the boxes, memories sealed in cardboard, and there it was. The box labeled old papers in Thomas's handwriting. My hands trembled as I dragged it out and sat on the floor cross-legged, the same way I used to when helping him sort receipts years ago. Inside lay documents that should never have been forgotten. The original LLC registration naming me as managing member. The trademark certificate for Sonia's table. My handwriting still crisp on the application. The registered recipe sheets, stamped and approved, each one bearing the formulas I created from nothing. A stack of photographs. Thomas and I smiling behind our first farmer's market booth, holding jars like proud parents. I touched the images gently, afraid they might crumble under the weight of time. I whispered into the quiet. He promised none of this would ever be erased. Beneath the papers was something I had forgotten entirely. The note Thomas wrote the year we filed the barcode system. Hidden marker. S's birthday, MMDD encoded. I remembered him grinning as he explained, "If anyone ever tries to copy us, The truth will still be in the code. Even if they change the label, the core will always be ours. My heart pounded. If that signature was still embedded, then no matter how Jason rebranded everything, the internal structure would still point back to me. I slipped into the kitchen, opening cabinet after cabinet until I found one of Jason's new jars, Harrington Harvest 44, sleek, modern, arrogant. I turned it over, scanned the QR code with my phone. The screen blinked, loaded, and revealed the back-end metadata. And there it was. The familiar structure Thomas left behind, the numbers of my birth date woven silently through the internal code. Not removed, not replaced, just buried beneath a prettier font and a colder color palette. My breath caught. I compared it with the original documents I had brought upstairs. And line after line, code after code, everything was identical. Jason might have changed the design, but he had never touched the foundation because he never realized it existed. He had built his empire on a framework he assumed was long gone. For the first time in years, my anger did not scare me. It steadied me. I whispered. You believed you erased me from the label, but you overlooked the one thing your father never forgot. The core has always been mine. The company is still mine. I gathered the papers into a tidy stack, smoothing each corner before tucking them beneath my arm. For a moment, I glanced around the kitchen. This room used to be warm once, a space where Thomas would dance with me barefoot on Sunday mornings. Now Hannah's spotless appliances and Jason's emptiness filled it. But neither of them possessed the one thing that mattered. When I went back to the basement, I didn't lie down. I placed the documents inside a folder and set it on the table where my sewing machine used to rest. My hands had stopped shaking. My breathing no longer faltered. I picked up my phone and searched for a number I hadn't dialed in years. A law firm specializing in business disputes and intellectual property. For the first time since Thomas passed, I made a call without asking anyone's permission, without the fear of being told I misunderstood, without Jason twisting my voice into his own version of the story. When the receptionist answered, I said, "My name is Sonia Harrington. I need to speak with an attorney regarding intellectual property rights. It concerns a brand created from my work." The words felt steady, anchored. After ending the call, I gazed at the documents once more. So many pieces of my life had been buried. But nothing buried stays forgotten forever. Not when the truth is coded. Not when the core still bears your name. Tomorrow I would meet with a lawyer. Tonight, I finally slept not as a forgotten woman on a cold floor, but as someone who had found the first thread leading back to herself. I arrived at the law office early, long before the winter sun managed to lift itself above the skyline. My hands felt cold, though not from the air. They trembled in a way I hadn't felt since standing beside Thomas, the day we filed our first business license. Only this time, I stood alone, not as a wife, not as a mother, but as someone finally stepping into her own truth. The receptionist guided me down a hallway into a small conference room where a young woman in a navy suit was reviewing a tablet. She rose as soon as she saw me. "Mrs. Harrington, I'm Vanessa Trent." "It's very nice to meet you," I nodded, trying to quiet the nerves fluttering inside my chest. "Please," she said softly, "start from the beginning." And I did. I told her about Thomas, about our recipes, about the kitchen where we stayed up late perfecting flavors from our childhood. I told her about the trademarks, the original LLC, the copyrights with my handwriting still on them. I explained how Jason rebranded the company, claimed credit for something he never created, and shoved me into the basement like I was an ingredient he wished he could discard. Then I laid out the documents on the table, one by one, arranged just as I had done the night before in my kitchen. Finally, I handed her the photo of the QR code metadata from Jason's new product. "That," I said quietly, "is my birthday encoded. Thomas added it years ago." For authenticity, Vanessa examined the papers slowly, tapping her pen in a thoughtful rhythm. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she lifted her gaze, calm and certain, startling me. "Mrs. Harrington," she said, "this isn't a simple family argument. This is a clear case of intellectual property violation." My breath halted. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Absolutely." Her voice gained a sharper confidence. "You are the original creator. You own the registered trademark. You filed the copyrights. There is no record showing you transferred ownership to your son, nor any licensing agreement giving him the right to use your work. Everything he's selling under this brand is unauthorized." Something loosened in my chest. Something I had carried so long I forgot it had weight. "Let me confirm one more thing," she added. She typed quickly on her tablet. then turned the screen toward me. Federal Records, she said. Here's the business listing. Your name is still listed as the active owner of the original brand. She scrolled again. And here your recipe copyright. Still active. Still yours. I stared at the screen. My name looked unfamiliar, important in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I whispered. Jason told everyone he built the business. He may have built a facade, Vanessa replied. But the foundation belongs to you. And the law recognizes the foundation. She leaned forward. Mrs. Harrington, if you choose to move forward, you can demand that he immediately stop selling all products derived from your intellectual property. You can seek damages. You can reclaim the entire brand. Legally, you are the rightful owner. My throat tightened. I don't want to destroy my son. Vanessa held my gaze firm but not unkind. You're not destroying him. His greed already did that. You are simply naming the truth he hoped would stay hidden. I looked down at my hands, folded tightly in my lap. I never wanted a fight. Most people don't, she said softly. But you deserve to take back what is yours. This is not revenge. This is restoration. Then she outlined the next steps. First, a cease and desist letter ordering Jason to stop production immediately. If he refused, we would take it to court. Vanessa spoke with a calm, measured clarity, yet every word she said sparked something inside me that I had forgotten was still alive. Are you ready to proceed? She asked. I hesitated only for a hot beat. Then I reached for the pen lying on the table. My hand hovered above the authorization form for a moment. I thought about the basement, the concrete floor, the thin mattress. I remembered the way Jason looked at me, as if I were nothing more than a burden he regretted being tied to. I thought about how he gambled away everything I had sacrificed for him, how he reduced my life's work to a footnote he wished he could delete. I signed slowly, deliberately. The ink did not tremble. When I placed the pen down, I felt taller, firmer, more grounded. My son gambled my entire life to give me a basement, I said softly. So now I will gamble the company to give myself justice. Vanessa nodded. Then let's begin. And for the first time in years, I felt the ground shift beneath me, not from loss, but from reclaiming what was mine. The cease and desist letter arrived in a thick white envelope with Vanessa's name printed neatly across the top. I knew the exact moment Jason opened it, because the entire house shook with his shouting. This is a joke, he roared from the kitchen. Some lawyer is manipulating her. She's old. She doesn't know what she's signing. Hannah shot back immediately. Then we'll tell the judge she's senile. No one listens to an old basement rat pretending she remembers business papers from 30 years ago. I heard it all from downstairs while folding laundry that wasn't even mine. Something tightened inside me, not fear, but recognition. A tree grows its highest right before the chainsaw comes. Jason spent the entire day pacing, cursing, yanking open cabinets as if they were to blame for what was happening. He kept repeating the same line again and again. She isn't taking this company from me. I built it. Me. But his voice carried a tremor he couldn't hide. The next evening, Hannah held a dinner for a major investor named Mr. Collins, a tall, composed man known for detecting brand instability before anyone else. Hannah made one thing very clear. I was not to be seen. Stay downstairs, she ordered. We can't have you wandering around like some relic from the past. But she still expected dinner to be ready. So I spent the afternoon cooking in silence while she bragged upstairs about her family-run success story. As I stirred the sauce in an old pot, the same one I used back when every recipe truly belonged to me, I heard light footsteps behind me. Oliver had slipped downstairs again, his face soft with worry. Grandma, he whispered, why is Dad angry about the papers you found? He said you're mistaken, but you never look mistaken. I placed my hand gently on his cheek. Sometimes people fear the truth, sweetheart, even when the truth is very simple. He nodded as though he understood far more than any child his age ever should. A few minutes later, a heavier set of footsteps descended the stairs. I thought it would be Hannah coming to scold me yet again, but instead it was Mr. Collins. He looked genuinely taken aback to find me kneeling beside the old pot. Forgive me, he said gently. I assumed this room was storage. There was a brief flicker in his expression, like something about seeing me. They're connected to a puzzle he had noticed before, but never spoken aloud. I didn't realize someone was actually working down here. I rose slowly. I'm always working here, I replied. He gave a polite smile, but his eyes drifted to the pot I was scrubbing. That recipe, he said almost casually, isn't that the original one that launched this entire brand? Before I could respond, Hannah materialized between us like a blade. She's just The family help. She cut in quickly. She gets confused and makes up stories sometimes. Don't let her distract you. Mr. Collins looked at her with confusion, but he didn't press the issue. Still, I could see something in his eyes, something unsettled. At the dinner table, Jason poured on the charm. He filled wine glasses, flashed practiced smiles, and delivered the line he always used whenever he wanted to appear self-made. We built this brand from scratch. No baggage, no drama, just clean growth. I stood in the doorway unnoticed, listening. That was when Jason's phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. And again. He glanced at it irritably until he saw who had sent the messages. His face drained of color. Even from where I stood, I recognized Vanessa's name glowing clearly across the screen. He opened the notification. For the first time in years, I watched my son lose the polished mask he had been wearing ever since Thomas died. The email wasn't sent only to him. It had been copied directly to Mr. Collins. I had asked Vanessa to do that. She didn't hesitate. A moment later, Collins's phone vibrated. His brow furrowed as he scrolled through the attachments, the original trademark documents, the copyright registrations, the LLC paperwork listing me as owner, the encoded QR data revealing my birthday inside the formula, and finally an old photo of Thomas and me proudly holding our first jars at the farmer's market. The entire table fell into silence. Slowly, with complete clarity, Collins placed his phone on the table and turned toward Jason. You told me, he said quietly, that this brand came with no legal complications. Jason swallowed hard. My mother is confused. He rushed out. She imagines she owns things she doesn't. We've only been taking care of her out of charity. Hannah forced a brittle laugh. Old people forget what belongs to them all the time. We've been so patient with her. Collins leaned back, studying them with growing disgust. From where I'm standing, he said. It looks like she's the one holding all of you up. He pushed his chair back sharply, napkins sliding off his lap without a second thought. I will not invest in a company built on theft. And he walked out, no dessert, no handshake, not even a backward glance. The front door shut with a finality that echoed all the way into the basement. And for the first time since this entire war began, I heard real fear in my son's voice. The civil court building felt colder than the winter outside, yet my hands did not tremble. As Vanessa guided me down the hallway, for the first time in decades, I did not feel small. I did not feel like a burden. I felt like someone who finally carried proof in her hands, not just fading memories. Stay close to me, Vanessa said quietly. You are not doing this alone. I nodded, my breathing steady. When we entered the courtroom, I saw Jason already sitting with his attorney. He wore a dark suit, giving him the look of a man who was respectable, responsible, almost heroic if you didn't know the truth. Hannah sat rigid beside him, her eyes slicing toward me with barely disguised hatred. The judge entered and everyone rose. When we sat, Jason instantly slipped into the role he had practiced for weeks. The devoted son, burdened with an impossible responsibility. His voice came out soft, controlled, dripping with false concern. My mother is declining mentally, he said. We've done everything we can to care for her. She needs supervision, and we provide it at great personal cost. His attorney added, we believe, Your Honor, that she has been influenced into thinking she possesses rights she never had. She is confused. Vanessa waited, her hands folded neatly. Then she rose with the calm precision of someone fully aware she held the winning hand. Your Honor, she said, I present Exhibit A. She placed photographs on the evidence screen, photos Jason assumed would never surface. The basement walls, the concrete floor, the thin, crumpled mattress. The blankets more suited for a stray animal than a 76-year-old woman. A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom. Please note, Vanessa continued evenly, that this is where Mr. Harrington required his mother to sleep. Jason stiffened. Hannah's jaw locked tight. Vanessa wasn't done. Exhibit B, she said. A written statement from 9-year-old Oliver Harrington, confirming he asked his grandmother, why don't you have a bed? And heard his father answer, she doesn't need one. Oliver was not brought into court. Vanessa insisted he be protected. His written words were enough. The judge's gaze sharpened. Then Vanessa delivered the strike. Exhibit C. Business registrations, trademarks, copyrights, QR coding, metadata, and correspondence demonstrating that Miss Sonia Langley is the original, legal, and sole registrant of the intellectual property used to build the Harrington brand. The courtroom fell silent. Then the judge looked to Jason. Mr. Harrington, she said, "Where exactly does your mother sleep?" Jason should have planned for that question. Instead, arrogance accomplished what truth hadn't. "In the basement," he said sharply. "She doesn't need a bed. She barely moves." Every sound in the room stopped at once. Someone in the back gasped. Another whispered, "Unbelievable." Hannah shifted as if wishing she could vanish. Even their attorney lowered his eyes, unwilling to be seen beside such cruelty. The judge turned slowly toward me. "Mrs. Langley," she asked gently, "is that accurate?" I kept my voice steady. "I sleep where they place me, Your Honor, on the floor." On a mattress that collapses into the concrete. There was no tremor, no bitterness, just truth spoken plainly, without fear. Vanessa stepped forward with a final stack of documents. "Your Honor, these records show that the brand Harrington Harvest 44 is built entirely on intellectual property belonging to Mrs. Langley, formulas, trademarks, and registrations she created, filed, and maintained. We have also provided an email sent by Mr. Harrington to an investor claiming his father created everything, despite overwhelming proof that Mrs. Langley is the legal and creative origin of the brand." The judge lifted the papers, reading them carefully. Then she stared at Jason, not as a judge, but like someone witnessing cruelty up close. "Mr. Harrington," she said, "this court finds that the intellectual property in question legally belongs to your mother. Furthermore, the treatment described here, forcing an elderly woman to sleep on concrete, is deeply troubling and speaks volumes about your credibility." Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. Jason's shoulders caved inward. The judge delivered her ruling like the closing of a heavy iron door. "You claim she does not need a bed," she said with cold precision. "This court strongly disagrees," she continued, each sentence hammering shut their lies. "You will immediately cease all use of her formulas, branding, and related materials. You will compensate her for unauthorized use, and this court is referring the matter of your treatment of your mother to Adult Protective Services for further review." Inside me, something settled, quiet, grounded, steady. A strength I had not felt since Thomas was alive. For years they tried to blot out my name, but today the court wrote it back in permanent ink. When the ruling was announced, it felt as though the entire house shifted on its foundation. The air changed lighter, freer, as if even the walls finally remembered who I was. Jason and Hannah walked into the house that evening without a word, each step heavy with the weight of consequences they once assumed they could dodge. But consequences do not chase. They wait, and the guilty eventually stop moving. Within 2 days, the state issued the official notice. Everything didn't collapse in one blow, but the unraveling came quickly, far quicker than any lie could be patched. The company's operating license was placed under suspension while the investigation began. Their distributors halted every shipment. Vendors demanded repayment. And the investor they had deceived, Mr. Collins, filed his own lawsuit, accusing them of hiding legal liabilities and lying about ownership. The very brand Jason loved to brag about. The one he claimed he built from scratch. Disintegrated faster than he ever dreamed possible. He spent hours calling suppliers, yelling into the phone, insisting the mess was only temporary. But a business built on stolen ground collapses the instant the rightful owner steps forward. At home, letters kept arriving, but this time they were addressed to me. Some came from the state, others from the bank, and a few from departments I barely remembered existed. Yet every letter said the same thing: I was a legal stakeholder. I always had been. The land under the house, the same land Thomas had once used as collateral, automatically reverted to my name once the court confirmed my ownership, and suddenly, the place where I had been forced into a basement became mine again, from the rooftop shingles to the dirt beneath the foundation. And I didn't evict them, not right away. Mercy, when served slowly, teaches lessons that anger never can. With Vanessa's help, I wrote a letter. It was polite, almost gentle. It simply stated that if they intended to stay in the home, they would owe rent, real rent, full rent, market rate rent plus triple the value of the space they had unlawfully used for years, along with a retroactive fee for occupying property they had tried so hard to take from me. Hannah read the letter first. I heard the paper trembling between her fingers. Jason tore it from her grip, scanned it twice, and his breathing grew louder with every sentence. "We can't pay this," he muttered, as if the universe might take pity on him. But the universe stayed quiet. 2 days later, they were packing. Not carefully, not with grace. Boxes thudded against walls, doors slammed, and accusations ricocheted through the halls. Hannah cried once, not for her cruelty but for her losses. When they finally left, the house went silent in a way that felt like morning fog lifting after decades. For the first time in years, I walked upstairs without needing permission. The master bedroom door stood open. Sunlight streamed across the wooden floor, illuminating a room I hadn't stepped into since Thomas was alive. Something trembled deep inside me, a knot of grief, nostalgia, and long-delayed relief. That same afternoon I ordered myself a bed, a strong, beautiful one with a firm mattress and a quilt stitched in warm colors. When it arrived, I watched the movers assemble it as though I were witnessing a quiet resurrection. A few days later, Oliver came to visit. He sprinted straight to the bedroom, jumped onto the mattress, and giggled as the springs bounced beneath him. "Grandma, you finally have a bed," he said, his smile bright enough to fill the whole hallway. I sat beside him, smoothing his hair with my hand. His smile softened into something gentle, something knowing. Children notice truths that adults pretend not to see. Hannah made one final attempt. She sent an email packed with long, looping apologies, pages about misunderstanding, exhaustion, business stress, and a plea to rebuild our relationship. I answered with one photograph, the mattress on the concrete basement floor, and a single sentence beneath it: "This is the life you believed I deserved. Now you can learn to live without what I created." She never responded again. Jason held out longer. When he finally called, his voice sounded thin, fragile. "I was angry," he said quietly. "I felt like you never believed in me." I let the silence settle before I spoke. "I believed in your potential," I said softly, "not in your greed." He swallowed, the sound almost audible. "Can we fix this?" My answer was gentle, not cruel. "You may fix yourself, that's all." I didn't slam the door. I simply closed it to the size of what was safe for me. Months drifted by. The house warmed again. I repainted the kitchen, reorganized the pantry, and restored Thomas's picture to the mantel where it had always belonged. And one morning Mr. Collins arrived with a proposal. He wanted to help revive the original brand on a smaller, honest scale locally. Sourced, community-driven, built on integrity rather than image. I agreed, not for revenge, not for triumph, but for legacy. The real kind. The kind untouched by falsehood. The new business didn't make millions. It didn't need to. It created dignity. It created truth. The local newspaper published an article titled "The Grandmother Whose Recipes Were Stolen and How She Won Them Back." I framed it and hung it by the kitchen door, not as a victory flag, but as a reminder that silence is not defeat. With the first profits, I started the Sonia and Thomas Foundation, a small program to help older women abandoned by their families or manipulated out of their homes, especially those forced into humiliating living conditions. I wanted to ensure no one else ever slept on concrete because someone younger decided they were disposable. One quiet spring evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. Oliver leaned against my shoulder, humming softly. The scent of warm grass and faint blossoms drifted through the air. My feet rested on a soft rug. My back was supported by a comfortable cushion. And inside the door was my room, mine, waiting with fresh sheets and a real bed. I closed my eyes and let the warmth rise through me. There was a time, I told Oliver, when I slept on a cold floor and thought it might be the end of me. He lifted his head, eyes wide. "But you're here," he whispered. I smiled. "Yes," I said, "I am." Then, in a voice steady and shaped by every storm I had survived, I spoke the truth that carried me through the darkest nights. "The day you asked why I didn't have a bed, your father said I didn't need one. But the judge disagreed, and life itself disagreed. In the end, the thing I never needed wasn't the bed. It was the children who forgot who their mother truly was." If you stayed with me through the end of this story, thank you. Stories like mine aren't just tales of pain or survival. They remind us that every grandmother, every aging woman pushed aside and silenced, still holds a spine of steel and a heart that refuses to dim. Justice may be late, but it arrives. And if my voice, my journey, or my fight for dignity touched you even a little, I invite you to join our family. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, a place where the unheard finally speak, where the overlooked rise again, and where justice, no matter how fragile it seems, always finds its way home. Thank you for listening, sweetheart. I'll see you in the next one. "Not just a bed, sweetheart," I said softly. "I finally have my place back."